find ourselves firmly upon our Lenten journey once again. Metaphorically, we have come to the banks of the River Jordan, and we have this wonderful gospel message to inspire us and move us through this season, to catapult us spiritually further toward Easter and Holy Week. Jesus has come to his cousin, John the Baptist, as hundreds of other people had come to John, and asked for his blessing to be baptized, to begin his earthly ministry, to give us the inspiration for baptism as well. And just as Jesus comes up out of the water, the heavens are opened and God's voice comes and says, "Listen to my beloved. This is my beloved child, with whom I am well pleased." That message of identifying Jesus so we know just who this incredible person is, who's going to go through the wilderness. My friends, we come to the banks of the Jordan today in many ways, don't we? We, through our baptism, continue our discipleship with Jesus Christ. We hear, or we should be able to hear with the ears of our soul, those words that God has chosen us, has made us a beloved child as well. I don't know about you, but I can resonate with that idea of being a beloved child of God because of the next phrase. Suddenly, Jesus was cast out into the wilderness. How often we find ourselves as children of God in the wilderness of a very large, bewildering, and often befuddling world. And yet that is the place in which we are called to minister and live into our discipleship. Jesus is driven out into the wilderness, and he's tempted by Satan. We know the classic temptations. Satan asks him to turn stones into bread, to make something other than God his sustenance. And Jesus does not do that. He says, man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. Satan takes Jesus to a high place and asks him to cast himself down so that angels will be able to save him from pain. How often in our world do we try to save ourselves from pain, and yet we know that that is part of life's journey, and those same angels that ministered to Christ will, through the Holy Spirit, be found in those unexpected places ministering to us. Satan takes Jesus to the top of the temple and shows him all the kingdoms of the world in their glory and says, "I will give you all of these if you will just not worship God, but worship me instead." And Jesus does not do that. Jesus stays true to the mind of God. Yet, my friends, how many places in our wilderness, in our world, how many places tempt us to put something in place of God? How many other things are there out there that can be worshipped instead of worshiping God? I don't have to name them. We all could come up with dozens, I'm sure. And so our Lenten journey is to acknowledge our belovedness in the midst of a fractured world in which we're called to minister. And as we do that, as we listen to Jesus' temptation, I think it boils down to a word that you and I go through each Lent. A word that is called discernment. We're in a discernment process, each and every one of us, when we're on a Lenten journey, when we're on the banks of the Jordan. What are we discerning? The four classic questions of discernment are, Who am I? Who did God make me to be as a child of God? What does God call me to do? Where does God call me to do it? And with whom does God call me to minister? The 4 classic questions of discernment we all ask during Lent. And so, my friends, as we find ourselves on Jordan's bank, I did a couple things. I brought in some stones, and I brought in some bread, and I brought in some water from the River Jordan. And I invite you, when you come up to communion or you come back from communion, to touch the water or to take a closer look at these stones. For in many ways, when we're on this discernment path, the stones and the bread are indeed a sign of what Jesus resisted, what Jesus did not do, which was find some other substance than God's. It's more than that, because Jesus went on and Jesus himself became the bread of life for us, transforming stones that are in the human heart into the living disciples of Christ. So ponder these metaphors. Ponder what it means to be on Jordan's bank. Ponder what it means to be in the midst of discernment. Ponder what it means to be a beloved child of God, set out in a wilderness, set on the road of discipleship. May all of our Lenten
Here you are, Boo. Oh, and make sure everyone can see them.
Oh, I will, Christopher.
Come one, come two, come all. Everyone heed the call. There's a very important thing to do. Drop what you're doing and come. Bumpity, bumpity, bump. There's a very important thing to do. It's time to gather round. The work has just begun. And when it's done, then you'll have found that you have had some fun with a monumentous consequential, very important